Today, you can see here, the Illinois Monarch project is what I'm going to be talking about. It's something that started in 2016, and it's a multi-sector approach to conservation success with the program in order to help the monarch population. And so I'm going to go through some of the aspects of the plan today and what the overall goals are for the IMP. So let's kind of do a little bit of basics here, and let's do a review or talk a little bit about the monarch life cycle and their multiple generations. So we can see here that the monarch lays an egg, and it'll sit on the leaf. It's pretty tiny if you've ever tried to find one. It sits for about a couple days, and then the caterpillar emerges with the sole purpose of eating. And so it'll eat and eat and eat and eat and eat for about 2 weeks, and then it begins to form a chrysalis. And when it forms that chrysalis, the body essentially becomes goo on the inside. It does actually have a couple organs. The heart for sure remains. And then in about 2 weeks, it transforms into a butterfly. It's going to do this for about 4 generations. They'll live about 2 weeks, do the same thing. They lay an egg, they hatch, caterpillar, chrysalis. So we're going to do that about 4 different times. But then around September, October, the 5th generation, the super generation, will emerge. And this is the generation that takes on the migration all the way down to Mexico. And in the next slide, I'll show you a picture of that. What's really interesting is that the butterfly's aging process dramatically slows down in order for it to make the journey down to Mexico, where it hangs out for about 3 months, and then it'll begin its journey back. And as it begins its journey back, its metabolism or aging process kicks back in again, and then it begins to lay eggs and then die. After it arrives in Texas, it will go ahead and lay eggs and then die, and then that first generation from Texas will then make it to Missouri, and then the cycle continues from there. So like I mentioned, the monarchs are a pretty mobile species, and you can see here on the map where the population migration route of the eastern population and the western populations of monarchs. You can notice the overwintering areas along the California coast and Florida, as well as the one in central Mexico, where the majority of monarchs in Illinois go. So billions of monarchs migrate in the summer from these overwintering areas to breeding areas in the spring and summer. You can see that by the representation of the green arrows. Then in the fall, they head back, like I mentioned, to the overwintering areas. So let's take a look. How do we measure the monarch population? We could think that they're actually out there counting individual monarchs, but that's not the case. They do this in the overwintering areas based on the amount of space that they take up. So the eastern population, which breeds here in the Midwest, we measure the area they occupy in the oh my gosh, I knew I was going to mess this up. Oyamel forest in central Mexico. So what you can see here, so they'll take drone footage or aerial footage of that forest, and how much of that is covered with the monarchs is how they measure the population of the monarchs for that year. And so what this graph is showing you here is the occupation of the monarchs since 1994. You can look here at the graph and see how we've got some changes. It is in hectares. And so 1 hectare is about 2.4 acres. So you can see in 1920, so just this last wintering season, you can see that we were at 2.84 or 83 hectares. Since 1994, you can see some variability by years, but overall there's a decreasing trend, which is why the United States Fish and Wildlife Service has been considering the monarch for endangered or threatened species, which will be decided by this December of 2020. It's estimated that a sustainable, healthy population of monarchs is around 6 hectares. You can see on the graph that we actually dropped 3.22 hectares since 18 and 19. So last year, in 2018 and 19, we actually had the healthy, sustainable healthy population levels at the 6 hectares, and then dropped 3.22 hectares in 19 and 20. And that decline, and like most of these, can be attributed to environmental factors like frost, drought, storms, but it can also be a huge part of habitat loss or even the lack of plants for the larvae of the monarchs. And so that's what the IMP is here to do. So what happened, the IMP effort, or the Illinois Monarch Project, was started because a lot of conservation was being done, and you can see that on the map, which shows monarch habitat efforts in Illinois, which was a response to the survey of nearly 300 responses on existing and ongoing monarch conservation activities across the state in June in 2016. It revealed that there was a lot of good work already happening, but there was also a need for additional support and coordination. So all across the state, we had stuff going on, but there wasn't anybody trying to pull all of those efforts together. So there was a summit, a statewide summit that occurred in September of 16, where they brought in 100 stakeholders. All of these were committed in following a cross-sector approach with representation and involvement from different levels and interest groups in order to create a collective strategy. Basically, we wanted everyone had a seat at the table and everyone had a role to play. So what has happened is a plan. They've developed this plan, and we'll talk about the mission and vision here. Since the summit, they've decided they have a dedicated group of sector leaders representing agriculture, natural lands, urban areas, and rights of way, because all of these can impact that impact the population and the food sources for the monarch butterflies. So the plan itself is basically finished, which is amazing. It's great. It's an incredible plan, and I can't wait for everybody to see it. Unfortunately, it will still be a draft until the executive committee and governor signs off on it. May is a monarch month for Illinois, and a summit was planned this month to have the IMP signed off, but with COVID, the summit's been suspended until the fall, and then the plan will be made official then. So these 11 organizations have been instrumental in shaping the Illinois Monarch Project over the last 18 months. You can see representing key perspectives and diverse stakeholder groups across the state. Again, it's important to build a strong, impactful conservation strategy that works for everyone. These organizations serve on the IMP technical steering committee, and you can see that we've got a diverse amount of groups, from the Department of Ag, the Field Museum, we've got the Farm Service Agency, to even the Illinois Department of Transportation, Pheasants Forever, all of them working together for the same sole purpose of protecting the monarch butterflies. So the Illinois Monarch Project has been meeting once a month for the last 3 years to work on a coordination, or to work on this collaborative effort. They've established long-term action. They have a long-term action plan to enhance the monarch butterfly reproduction and survival in Illinois. And so we can see here the executive committee and how it's made up of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Agriculture, the EPA, as well as the Department of Transportation. From there, we've got the steering committees, and I will give you those names of those steering committee members here towards the end. And then from there, you can see the sector groups. And so each one of the sector groups has met individually as well, developing their own action initiatives that they want that will help work together. And so I've sat on the agriculture sector group since its inception. And so with the science committee, the community engagement and communications, they all kind of fill in as well with each one of these groups, doing similar work with those. And so we're trying to promote and support voluntary conservation action by private landowners. We want to support regional, national, and international monarch butterfly conservation strategies. And so You're just looking here to see how each one of these groups is all working together to tie this in for the one sole purpose of the Monarch project. And so here we've got the picture or a graph of the Illinois sector groups and committees. And you can see where each one of these is focused. On the rights of way, you're looking at roadsides, electrical, gas, railroads, wastewater, drainage sites. These would all be areas of rights of way. And then the agriculture would be your farm bill programs. As a matter of fact, in 2012, the federal government released the CP42 plan, which was basically putting ground aside, or having landowners put ground aside for pollinators, putting in native species, specific plants in order to help provide food sources for pollinators. So even things like buffers and field edges, university farms and fairgrounds, the Illinois Department of Agriculture at the Illinois State Fairgrounds has put in several pollinator gardens there as well. And then we've got natural lands that are federally owned, state-owned lands, land trust, reclaim sites, and conservation easements. Here's another group. And then our urban areas are municipal-owned lands, colleges, universities, libraries, and other landscape-type areas. So if we move into some of the guiding principles, it starts with important focus on supporting and protecting monarchs in Illinois. That's the vision here. We want to also recognize that monarchs represent an opportunity to highlight and preserve our natural heritage in the state, and more broadly support biodiversity. What's good for monarchs is good for other pollinators and birds and mammals, and ultimately humans too. So that goes along with our mission. This conservation opportunity is incredible. It's once in a lifetime. There's so much public interest and support for monarch butterflies that we can change the way that people in Illinois, and even those that visit our state, think about and behave when it comes to natural resources. Everyone from school children to mayor, farmers, and electric utility companies have an opportunity to engage in conservation and create a positive, lasting impact for generations to come. The biggest thing here, what we want to emphasize, is that we want this to be all hands on deck. We want everybody out there to take their own part in this program. It's not just farmers, it's not just natural resources department, it's everybody can play a part in this. So the biggest question here is, at the end of May, all the efforts and information that has occurred since 2016 or 2016 will be sent to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to talk about not only our plan, what things have been done, and they are going to take that information and look at all that compiled data and then make a determination in December of this year whether the monarch should be listed or not. And a lot of this, the big question is it could be listed one of three ways. The first one is not listing the monarch at all. The second is to list it as threatened, or the third would be to list it as endangered. And so we'd all like to hope that it doesn't get listed, but there is kind of a thought with the population decline of this last year is that it might be listed as threatened. But again, that's speculation. And again, we all hope that it's not listed at all, and that these efforts that we continue to do continue to help that population thrive. So let's do a little bit of background here. When President Obama visited Mexico, the Mexican president asked him about the monarch population decline. And President Obama at the time had really no idea what he was talking about. And so that ended up leading for this national, or led to this national strategy for pollinators in 2015. So the federal government's been petitioned and actually sued over the lack of action on protecting the monarch. So that's part of the reason why they're going to decide in December of 2020 on whether it warrants protection under the Endangered Species Act. There's a lot of pressure to have something happen. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife has shared a modified, this map here that you're looking at is a modified map of a version called the heat map. And the dark purple areas that you can see identify the northern core states. And then the medium purple is the southern core states. So together, the core area for the eastern migrating population includes 17 states in the northern mid-continental portion of the US. So 95, if you can see there, 95 of the 102 counties in Illinois are considered in the northern core. The remaining 7 would be in the southern core. This is just showing where the emphasis is where the conservation units need to occur. Preliminary conservation strategies call for an estimated 1.3 to 1.8 billion, not million, billion milkweed stems on the breeding and migratory landscape to be added. So what this means is it translates to about 29 million acres of new or enhanced monarch habitat. And we can assume, although I'm going to tell you some conflicting data here in a minute, that one assumes 45 or 55 stems per acre average. And truly that does seem to be a pretty low stem average or low estimate, stem per acre estimate. There's some new studies, and I'll post those links here in the chat later on, of new studies that have gone out that's showing that on some of this ground, especially like CP42 ground, that they can have upwards of 500 to 600 stems per acre. So Illinois, if we look at this big map here of the northern quarter, they're estimating this 1.3 billion stems of milkweed for the dark purple area, and from which they're estimating Illinois' land is at 12.4% of the area in the dark purple. So you end up with 150 million stems of milkweed is the goal by 2038 for Illinois. So the IMP project decided that they needed an action plan aimed at reaching this goal, and they ended up creating an action plan, which I mentioned will be finalized when they're able to have that summit in the fall. The goals of the plan here, and I will share those with you, are here. The first one, in the development of the regional strategy, we've identified these high level of goals. They'll continue to be fleshed out with more specific strategies and action items, and those are in the plan. And as those are released, or when this plan is finalized, that will be released. So the first goal here is to create an active collaborative of diverse stakeholders to coordinate the development and implementation of conservation strategies for monarch butterflies and pollinator species. I think that is crucial in the fact that we're not just focused on monarchs, we are focused as well on other pollinator species. The second goal there is to inform conservation strategies using the best available science on monarch butterfly and pollinator health and habitat, which is why we've got that science committee in there as well, working to make sure that we're kind of debunking any myths that might be out there, or furthering the research that's being done so that we can have that up-to-date information out for folks. We're also the goal 3 is to develop focused outreach and education campaigns to align activities across the state. And that's one of the biggest reasons, is as we were doing this plan, realizing how much was being done and trying to coordinate all those efforts. We also want to make sure that on the 4, we're conserving and enhancing and restoring habitat on public and private lands to support populations of monarch butterflies and pollinator species, including the addition of 150 million stems of milkweed, along with other nectar sources across Illinois by 2038. And it's not just milkweed, we also need other food sources, but the milkweed does play a crucial part. The last one, standardize monitoring and data collection for monarch butterfly and pollinator habitat, utilizing geospatial data to identify and quantify baseline and potential habitat for monarch butterflies and pollinators across the ag, natural lands, rights-of-way, and urban sectors. So the IMP groups and sectors are not only writing this plan, but they're acting at the same time. They've been doing a lot of habitat going on the landscape, and groups forming to help share seed and do other pretty neat things across the state. Again, like I mentioned, with the inception of the CP42, the pollinator habitat planning in 2012, Illinois has 100,000, actually 103,000 acres. And those acres are estimated to have 500 to 600 stems. So that puts us at 50 million stems already there. So we're not far off of the 150 million stems. And like I mentioned here, there's also these monarch waste. I haven't mentioned monarch waste stations yet, but I will talk about that. But there's been new places put in at the state fairgrounds. You can see here some other, and then the roadsides, the rights way, the mowing on the roadsides to try to make sure that we have new or young milkweed plants all along the roadsides in a timely manner as well, have all been huge stepping stones. Another one that was done, one example in the ag sector. So not only is there the overall Illinois Action Plan, ag wanted to get out there, the ag sector itself, the one that I was on, we came out with a plan, kind of a sub plan within the big plan. And you can see that online. You can check out that link, and I can put that up in the chat as well, and check out the ag action plan. There to help inform the public on how farmers are being successful when it comes to pollinator habitat and getting milkweed on the ground. It also includes resources and plans to overcome future challenges. There's also a website for this one, the illagformonarchs.org. So you can go check that out and look at that. Earth Day on 2019, they rolled this plan out. Here's some more on celebrating some more successes. The new mowing policy created more than 80,000 acres of roadside habitat. Pheasants Forever supported 6,600 acres of habitat. 29 mayors have signed the Mayor Monarch Pledge. The Field Museum has developed a series of urban habitat planning tools. So there's a lot of great things going on. Again, here's the mowing strategies have been released. And so it's definitely worth checking that out. It's really hard to not want to mow, but when you've got good things happening in that area, as far as pollinators go, this is a really great strategy that you can go through and kind of modify some mowing habits in areas that are key habitat locations for pollinators. So how can you help? Well, there's several different ways, whether it's just not mowing in certain locations at certain times, but there is U of I has a program called I Pollinate. This was just started in the last 2 years, and it's a citizen science project. So if you've ever wanted to be involved in research and not really have to leave your home, this is it. It's a really neat program where you can collect data and submit this into the university, where they can take and pull that information and use it for the overall good of pollinators. So you can create a garden with specific species in mind. They have a list of particular plants that they are encouraging folks to do. And then from June to September, you'll actually go out and observe once a week those plants. And it's 1 week a month, 1 week a month from June to September, and you can observe those plants and pollinators and then submit that information. What's nice is that this would be information all across the state and not just all around the university area. So pulling in when things are blooming, because from north to south is definitely different. And so this is a way that you can get involved and take that back, and that information can be then used to help update the plan and provide that accurate science that we need. There's also the Bee Spotter program, and that can be signed up here as well. And that's very similar, where you're checking out different bee species that are coming to certain plants in your garden. And so all these are very helpful to gather this information across the state on pollinators. There's another program, and this one doesn't require the feedback, but this one does ask that you put in a garden with different species in there as far as milkweed goes, or habitat for the monarchs and other pollinators. So you can create or improve a habitat for monarchs. There are a lot of different resources out there, and I suggest planting a monarch way station and registering it. That might be the way to go. Or you can set up a group to do this as well. There are other programs like Living Acres Initiative through BASF. I signed up for that through the farm show last year, and my milkweed came in the mail. I got 24, it was butterfly milkweed plants, and we've planted those out on our property for the monarchs to come out through. And so there's a lot of different things. And again, you don't necessarily have to plant habitat, but just be mindful of mowing practices, or even help educate others, are all great things that can help out with this program. And so I hope that in the next week or so, they plan to roll out the new website for the Monarch Action Plan, and then the plan itself will be fully enacted this fall after the summit occurs. And I encourage you all to kind of keep your ear to the ground through December as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife gets ready to make the announcement as to how they're going to list the monarch butterfly. So here's the contact information for those. Remember the sector groups I was talking about as far as agriculture, the natural resources, the rights-of-way group. All of these folks here are in the urban area. So Iris Caldwell is part of the natural lands. Austin Omer is the agriculture contact. The natural lands is Ann Halthrop, or Trop, I apologize. And then Doug Stotz is the rights-of-way, or the urban areas person, I apologize there. So all of these folks, if you have interest in any of this and would like to be a part or know more information, you're welcome to contact any of those, or myself for that matter.